Hello, friends. Night has already fallen, and the day was long and tiring. And now, it is time to rest. As always, I will tell you a kind legend that once took place in our beloved Middle-earth. So, settle in comfortably, gently close your eyes, and let our journey begin. The wind that swept down from the north carried with it a taste of iron and ash. Though spring had come to the woods of Dorthonion, the air was chill and restless, as if some great beast stirred in its sleep beneath the mountains. Far to the south, beyond the shadowed pines, the river Sirion wound like silver through the vales, and the land seemed at peace. Yet those who kept watch upon the borders of Angband had long ceased to trust in peace. Among them was Arda, captain of scouts in the service of Finrod Felagund, king of Nargothrond. He was young for one of the Noldor, if such a word could be used of those who had seen the light of the two trees, but already his eyes were keen, and his judgment steady. Beneath his grey cloak glimmered the faint trace of mail, and upon his shoulder he bore the badge of Finrod's house, the harp of gold upon a field of green. For many years the long peace had endured. The hosts of Morgoth stirred seldom from their black fortress in the north, and though evil things prowled by night, the strength of the elven realms held firm. Yet now, troubling rumors had reached Nargothrond. Messengers who rode north toward Dorthonion vanished upon the road. Watchfires went unanswered, and strange lights were said to move by night upon the hills, cold and glimmering, like the eyes of spirits. So Finrod summoned Arda to his hall of stone and silver. "Long have we trusted that Morgoth's spies would not dare creep so far south," said the king, his voice quiet, but his gaze sharp as a blade. "Yet I fear the darkness works again in secret. Go you, with 5 of your best, swift and silent. Find what truth there is in these tales. If the enemy has sent his eyes among us, they must be found and put out." Arda bowed low. "It shall be done, my lord." Thus he set forth the next dawn with 5 companions. Legor, a Sindarin tracker who knew every bend of the forest paths. Caranth, a Noldorin archer whose arrows never missed their mark. Terwin, a healer and lore mistress. Baraneth, a mortal of the house of Beor, tall and grave of countenance. And Elthor, the youngest, silent as moonlight and deft of hand. For 7 days they journeyed north, passing from the wooded lands into the high, bleak slopes of Dorthonion. The trees grew darker there, pines with blackened trunks and roots clutching at the stones like twisted fingers. Birds were few, and the silence of the land weighed heavy upon them. One evening, as the light failed, Legor knelt beside the trail. His keen eyes studied the soft earth. "Bootprints," he murmured. "Small and many. Too small for orcs. Too light for men." Arda crouched beside him. "Elves, perhaps?" "Perhaps," Legor answered, though doubt clouded his voice. "But there is something strange in the gate. They walk as though half blind or unwilling." They followed the prince into a narrow glen where a stream whispered faintly beneath the roots of ancient oaks. There they found a sign, a tattered cloak of elvish make, torn and stained. Upon its clasp was the mark of Nargothrond. Terwin bent low and brushed away the dirt from the metal. "This belonged to one of the king's messengers," she said softly. "See? Here, the rune of Felagund's hand." Baraneth frowned. "Then he came this way, and never returned." As they made camp beneath the trees, Arda stood long in thought. His eyes strayed northward, to where the peaks of Thangorodrim loomed faint in the distance, black against the stars. If spies of Morgoth move in this land, he said, then they are not orcs alone. These tracks are too cunning. There is craft behind them. Elvish craft. That night, Erendilion dreamt. In his sleep, he walked through halls of stone, lit by a dim red glow. The walls were carved with faces, elvish faces, twisted and weeping, their eyes blindfolded with iron bands. From the shadows came a whisper, "The halls unseen, beneath your feet they lie." Then a sound like the breaking of stone, and he awoke in darkness, his heart pounding. At dawn they pressed onward, climbing higher into the hills. The land grew rough and broken, strewn with fissures and old ruins. Here and there stood stones carved with strange runes, half buried in moss. Tyrwen traced one with her fingers and whispered, "Kuzdul, dwarven make." Long ago they delved here, before the world grew dark. As she spoke, the wind shifted, carrying with it a faint stench of smoke and decay. Elthor pointed to a nearby ridge. "Look." From a cleft in the hillside rose a thin wisp of grey vapor, like breath from the mouth of a beast. Around it, the earth was scorched and bare. Erendilion's hand went to his sword. "There lies our answer." They climbed the ridge and came to a dark opening in the rock, wide enough for two to walk abreast, yet low and rough-hewn, as though shaped by ancient tools. A chill draught issued from it, smelling of rust and death. "Legor," said Erendilion, "what say you?" The Sindar bent low, examining the stone. "This place is no work of Morgoth's making. It is old, older than the war itself. Yet something evil now moves within." Erendilion nodded. "Then we shall go down and see what lurks beneath. If the halls unseen are real, perhaps they begin here." They lit their torches, and one by one descended into the darkness. The light flickered on damp stone and vanished into shadow. The air grew heavy, filled with the distant sound of dripping water and the faint echo of chains. None spoke, but each felt the same dread thought stir in their hearts, that they had stepped beyond the world of light into the echo of some older curse. And behind them, as they passed out of sight, the wind died, and the woods were silent once more. The descent was long, and the air grew colder as they went. The torches hissed and sputtered, casting wavering gold upon the walls. The passage wound downward in a steep spiral, its stones slick with age. Sometimes the way broadened into small chambers, sometimes narrowed, so that they were forced to go single file, pressing their shoulders against the rough-hewn sides. No sound reached them, save their own slow tread and the drip of unseen water. After a time, they came to a place where the path divided. One way sloped further down into darkness. The other turned aside into a narrow gallery lined with stone pillars. Upon those pillars, strange carvings had been chiseled long ago, runes half worn away by time. Tyrwen brushed the dust from one with her sleeve and murmured, "These were made by the dwarves of Belegost. They mined here in the elder days, before the rising of Morgoth's might." Legor lifted his torch higher. If this was a dwarven hall, it has long been forsaken. Yet see, footprints in the dust. Fresh. The marks were clear. Slender feet, bare but dragging, as if the walker moved with weary limbs. Erendilion frowned. "No dwarf leaves such prints. Come, quietly now." They followed the trail through the gallery into a wide cavern where the ceiling arched high above, lost in shadow. Stalactites hung like the teeth of some sleeping beast. At the far end, near a black pit, a faint glimmer moved, like starlight upon water. Erendilion motioned for silence and crept forward, his hand on his sword. Then, out of the darkness, a figure stepped into the torchlight. It was a man, or what once had been a man. His hair hung lank upon his shoulders, and his eyes gleamed pale as glass. His skin was grey, and around his wrists were bands of iron. He looked upon them with no recognition, only hollow weariness. Baraneth's voice broke the silence. "By the Vala, he is one of my people!" The creature flinched at the sound, retreating a step toward the pit. Erendilion raised his hand. "Peace, friend. We mean you no harm. Tell us, what place is this?" For a moment there was no answer. Then, in a voice cracked with thirst, the man whispered, "You should not have come. They hear everything that moves here. The watchers below, they never sleep." "Who watches?" Erendilion asked. But the man only shook his head and looked toward the pit. "The halls unseen," he murmured. "The shadow halls where the captives dwell. Go back, before they mark you too." Terwyn stepped forward with pity in her eyes. "Come with us. You are free now." But before she could finish, the man gave a strangled cry. His body convulsed, and his eyes turned black as ink. In a voice not his own, he hissed, "Fools, you cannot hide from the eyes of Angband." Then he leapt into the pit, vanishing into the dark. A dull thud echoed far below, and the cavern fell silent. For a moment, none could move. Legor's face was pale. He was ensnared. His will was not his own. Erendilion's jaw tightened. "So Morgoth's hand reaches even here? These halls unseen?" "We must find them." Caranth knelt beside the pit, lowering his torch. "There's a tunnel below, too steep to climb down safely. But there are other passages branching west. Perhaps one leads to the same depth." They took that way, pressing on through narrow corridors that twisted like veins through the rock. The torches burned low, and the air grew foul. At last, they came upon a doorway of black stone, half buried in the earth. Across its lintel was carved a strange device, a circle within which a single eye had been etched, weeping fire. Terwyn drew a sharp breath. "That mark! Morgoth's servants have claimed this place." Erendilion's hand closed on the hilt of his sword. "Then our path is chosen." They entered the doorway, and a stench like rotting earth met them. The passage beyond was broader, the walls lined with iron sconces that once had held torches, long since burned to ash. In that flickering light they saw chains fastened to the walls, and in the corners, bones bleached white. Elthor's whisper trembled. "Who built this? Not dwarves?" "No," said Baraneth darkly. "This was made for prisoners." As they advanced, faint sounds began to reach them. Moans, the scraping of metal, and the echo of distant footsteps. The path descended again, and before long they came to a vast chamber whose floor was cracked and uneven. There, bound to the stones by iron rings, lay figures that once had been elves. Their eyes opened as the light touched them. Yet no joy awoke in their faces. Their gazes were blank, and strange black lines marred their skin like veins of shadow. One stirred and spoke with a voice hollow as wind through graves. "Why come you here, children of light? We are the forgotten, the used, the broken eyes of Angband. Soon you will join us." Terwyn knelt beside one of the captives, horror in her eyes. "These are not dead, and yet not living. Their spirits are bound." Erendilion turned to her. "Can your art free them?" "I do not know," she whispered. "This is sorcery beyond my skill." Before more could be said, a noise came from beyond the chamber, a low rumble, like the tread of heavy feet. Legor's torch wavered. "Orcs!" The company took cover behind the fallen stones, as a troop of Morgoth's creatures entered the hall, tall and misshapen, bearing spears of black iron. At their head came a cloaked figure, whose face was hidden, but whose very presence chilled the air. The orcs prostrated themselves as he passed. The figure spoke in a voice soft and cruel. The intruders draw near. I smell the scent of Nargothrond upon them. Bring them to me alive if you can, but do not let them flee. The Lord of Angband desires new servants. The orcs grunted in assent and scattered into the tunnels. Erendilion's heart burned. "That one commands the spies," he said. "We must follow him." When the chamber was empty again, they slipped from their hiding place and trailed the cloaked figure through a passage that sloped downward into the depths. The way grew narrower, until at last they came to a hidden door of iron, set flush into the rock. Through its narrow seam glowed a faint red light. Erendilion pressed his ear against the door and heard voices beyond, one low and harsh, the other eerily familiar. Then words came clear. "The ring must not be lost," said the harsh voice. "It binds their will to mine, and through them the North watches for our master. Soon the long peace will end, and Beleriand will burn." Erendilion's blood ran cold. The ring, the heart of Morgoth's new deceit. He glanced at his companions, their faces tense and pale in the dim light. "Now we know their purpose," he whispered, "and we know what we must destroy." From within came the sound of footsteps approaching the door. Erendilion drew his sword, its edge gleaming faintly. "Ready yourselves," he murmured. "When the door opens, strike." The latch turned, the door groaned, and the light of the torches flared on drawn steel as the darkness of Angband stirred to meet them. The door swung wide with a shriek of iron, and from the red-lit chamber beyond came a gust of air so hot and foul that it seemed to breathe like some vast furnace. Erendilion sprang forward, his sword flashing pale in the gloom. The cloaked figure within turned sharply, and for the first time the company beheld his face, or rather, what was left of it. His features were those of an elf, fair once, but now marred by dark sorcery. The flesh about his eyes was blackened as if burned, and where his heart should have been, there glimmered a faint red fire. Around his neck hung a ring wrought of black metal, upon which a dull light pulsed like a heartbeat. "So," he said, his voice echoing with cruel amusement, "the hounds of Finrod come sniffing to my door. Tell me, Erendilion, does your king still sing to the stars while the shadow gathers beneath his feet?" Erendilion's breath caught. "You know my name." The figure laughed, a hollow sound that rang from the stone. "I should. Once I was counted among his court. Do you not know me, scout of Nargothrond? I am Eldarion, son of Avaron, one who served your king before the Battle of Sudden Flame was even dreamt of." Tyrwin gasped. Eldarion vanished 20 years ago on the northern road. "Aye," the creature said, spreading his hands, "vanished into the mercy of Angband. Morgoth opened my eyes to truth, and through me he sees much. Behold, the first of his spies." He lifted his hand, and the black ring gleamed. "These halls are mine to command, and through their captives his gaze pierces even the light of Nargothrond." Caranth's arrow was on the string before the last word left Eldarion's lips. "Then your gaze ends now." The bow twanged. The arrow flew. But before it struck, Eldarion raised his hand, and the shaft burst into flame mid-flight. A wave of heat washed over them, and the torches flickered. "Fools," he hissed. "You bring fire into fire's dominion. Did you think Morgoth leaves his servants undefended?" Then the walls themselves seemed to stir. From crevices and doorways poured shapes, twisted things, part orc, part elf, their eyes dull and unseeing. They moved like sleepwalkers, weapons clenched in pale hands. the air filled with the clash of steel and the stench of smoke. Erendilion met them head-on. His sword flashed, cutting through the ranks of thralls, but for every one that fell, another stumbled forward. Beside him, Baraneth fought like a storm, his mortal strength felling two with each swing. Legor's knives spun silver through the dark, and Tyrwin hurled the oil from her healer's kit into the flames, turning them into blinding bursts of light that sent their foes reeling. Yet still Eldarion stood untouched, his eyes burning with a cruel light. "You cannot slay them," he said. "Their wills are bound to the ring. Break their bodies, and they will rise again. Only by surrendering your own light can you free them, and that none of you dare." "Then I shall dare," Erendilion cried, and leapt toward him. Their swords met, light against darkness, and sparks leapt where their blades clashed. Eldarion moved with unnatural speed, his strength drawn from the ring's fire. But Erendilion's resolve was unbending. The clang of steel echoed through the chamber like a bell of doom. At last, Eldarion struck him back against a pillar. The captain's sword flew from his grasp and skittered across the floor. Eldarion raised his blade high, the red light dancing along its edge. "You will serve as I do," he said softly. "One touch of the ring, and your mind will be mine." But before the blow fell, Tyrwin seized a fallen torch and hurled it at Eldarion's hand. The flames caught the hem of his cloak, and in that moment of distraction, Baraneth charged. His spear drove through Eldarion's side, pinning him to the pillar. The creature screamed, a sound not wholly mortal, and clawed at the shaft, but the spear would not come free. Erendilion rose, seizing his fallen sword. "Your ring binds them," he said grimly. "Then let it end." He struck with all his strength, and the blade bit through Eldarion's hand. The black ring clattered to the floor, glowing like molten iron. At once, the thralls froze. Their weapons fell, and their eyes turned upward, as if waking from a long nightmare. Then, slowly, they crumpled, lifeless now, released from their bondage. Eldarion fell to his knees, the fire fading from his eyes. "You do not understand," he gasped. "The ring was not mine, it was his echo. He can make another, and another, still. You have only delayed him." "Then I will delay him again," Erendilion said, and brought his sword down. The sound of the stroke echoed through the chamber, and Eldarion's body fell still. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of dying flames. The ring lay upon the stone, its glow dimming but not gone. Tyrwin bent beside it, her face pale. "We cannot leave it here. If Morgoth's power still dwells within, others may find it." Erendilion nodded. "Then we take it, and destroy it if we may. These halls must not remain." They gathered what strength they could, and pressed deeper into the tunnels, seeking the heart of the place. The further they went, the more ancient the stone became, until they came to a cavern vast beyond sight. In its midst yawned a chasm, and far below glimmered a faint red glow, the forges of Angband's farthest reach. "This," Legor whispered, "is where the fire is fed." Erendilion looked to Tyrwin. "The ring. Throw it down." She hesitated, the metal trembling in her hand. "It burns," she whispered. "It speaks. Promises of power, of sight beyond sight. It would have me serve again what it once served." Erendilion stepped close, his voice firm. "Then do not listen. Cast it away." Tears shone in her eyes, but with a cry she flung the ring into the abyss. For a heartbeat, it shone like a falling star, then was gone. A great tremor shook the cavern, and a roar like thunder filled their ears. Cracks split the stone, and the floor began to heave. "Back!" Erendilion shouted. "The halls are falling!" They ran, dodging falling rock and bursts of fire. Behind them, the chamber collapsed, sealing the pit forever. The tunnels quaked as the ancient halls came undone, swallowed by the earth that had long held them. At last, they burst into the open air beneath the starlit sky. The ridge behind them split, sending up a cloud of ash. They stood gasping upon the mountainside, their faces streaked with soot. Of the 6 who had entered the halls unseen, only 4 now remained. Elthor had fallen amid the ruins, and Baraneth lay wounded, his strength spent. Tyrwin knelt beside him, binding his wounds with trembling hands. When dawn came at last, Erendilion stood looking northward. In the far distance, the peaks of Tungarodrim glimmered like black teeth beneath the rising sun. "The fire sleeps again," he murmured, "but not forever." Legor came to his side. "What now?" "We return to Nargothrond," said Erendilion. "Finrod must know what evil has awakened beneath his realm. The long peace is ending, though few yet see it." As they turned southward, the wind shifted, carrying with it the faintest echo of a whisper, like laughter from far below the earth. And Erendilion knew then that, though the ring was gone, its shadow yet lingered, unseen and waiting. So the spies of Angband were silenced for a time, and the halls unseen were buried beneath the hills of Dorthonion. Yet their memory endured in the dark corners of song, a warning of what lies hidden beneath the fair face of the world, and of how even among the Eldar, light may falter, but never wholly fade. They journeyed south beneath the wide skies of Beleriand, the smoke of the fallen hills trailing behind them like a dark banner. No birds sang in the pines as they went, and the air still carried the taint of fire. For many leagues they walked without speech, each lost in his own thought, the weight of what they had seen pressing heavy upon their hearts. By the 3rd night, they reached the borders of the forest of Brethil, where the leaves still whispered softly, untouched by shadow. There they made camp beside a small stream, its water clear as crystal. Erendilion sat apart from the rest, sharpening his blade beneath the stars. The sound of the whetstone was steady and low, like a heartbeat in the silence. Tyrwin came to him, her cloak drawn close against the chill. "You have not spoken since we fled the halls," she said gently. He glanced up, the firelight flickering in his grey eyes. "There is little to say. We brought ruin upon that place, but not upon the will that made it. Morgoth's reach is long. If he can twist the hearts of our own kin, then no realm is safe." She seated herself upon the moss beside him. "Yet what we did matters. Those thralls were freed from torment. The ring is gone." "Is it?" he murmured, gazing into the night. "The fire that forged it still burns. I saw it with my own eyes, far below, beneath the stone. We destroyed only the hand that held the knife, not the one who wields it." Tyrwin said nothing for a while. Then she spoke softly. "You blame yourself." He gave a faint, weary smile. "A captain who loses his men always does. Elthor, Baraneth, they fell under my command. Their names will weigh upon me when songs are sung." She touched his arm. "Then let their names be remembered with honor. None could have done more than you." He nodded, though his gaze remained distant. "I will not rest until Finrod knows all. The shadows beneath Dorthonion are not ended. They are only hidden." The following day, they came upon a ruined watchtower of stone, long abandoned. Its stair was broken, its walls half buried in ivy. Yet from its height, they could see far across the land, the plains of Talath Dirnan, stretching golden beneath the sun, and beyond them, the green hills that guarded the gates of Nargothrond. Erendilion's heart stirred. "Home," he said softly. Legor shaded his eyes. "Smoke upon the western wind. perhaps fires of the forges, or... He did not finish. They pressed on swiftly, and by nightfall the hidden gates came into view. The caverns of Nargothrond lay beneath the earth, but their approach was fair, a valley carved by the river Narog, its entrance masked by the cliffs. The sentries hailed them with joy, for they had been thought lost. Within the great halls, all was light and song once more. Finrod Felagund himself came down to greet them, his hair gleaming like gold beneath the torches. Yet when his eyes fell upon their weary faces and their diminished number, the joy faded from his brow. "You have seen battle," said the king. "Tell me all." And so, in the high hall of Nargothrond, before the gathered captains, Erendilion told his tale. He spoke of the tunnels beneath Dorthonion, of the twisted thralls, of Eldarion, and the black ring that bound their wills. He told of the fire in the deep and the ruin of the halls unseen. As he spoke, a hush fell upon the hall, and even the torches seemed to burn lower. When he had finished, Finrod was silent for a long time. At last he said, "Dark indeed is the work of our foe, that he could so pervert one of our own. This strikes deeper than the wounds of war." Terwyn bowed her head. "We have seen the proof of it, my lord. The enemy's sorcery grows stronger, and his servants creep ever closer to our borders. The long peace may not endure." Finrod's eyes grew distant, as though he looked beyond the stone walls to something unseen. "I have feared as much," he murmured. "Long have we rested in the belief that our strength and secrecy would shield us. Yet even in the quiet years, the enemy builds his snares. If spies move again in Beleriand, then the hour of shadow draws near." He turned to Erendilion. "You have done well, though the cost was bitter. Your courage has spared us from greater peril. The names of your fallen will be sung in the halls of remembrance." Erendilion bowed, though his heart was heavy. "I would rather their voices still sang among us." Finrod's gaze softened, as would we all. That night a feast was held in honor of the survivors, but the joy was muted. Music echoed faintly through the halls, yet beneath it lay unease, a murmur of fear unspoken. Many eyes turned northward, toward the unseen darkness beyond the mountains. Later, when the revels were ended, Erendilion wandered alone through the deep tunnels of Nargothrond. The lamps burned dim, and his footsteps echoed softly on the stone. He found himself in the king's treasury, where relics of elder days lay guarded. Blades from Valinor, helms of the high elves, and jewels that gleamed with captured starlight. Among them, upon a marble plinth, rested a shard of black metal. It was twisted and cracked, yet a faint red gleam still pulsed within. Terwyn's voice came from behind him. "I see you have found it." He turned, startled. "You brought it back?" "I could not leave it buried," she said quietly. "It was part of Eldarion's sword, the blade forged with the ring's same fire. Finrod believes it may hold some key to understanding Morgoth's craft." Erendilion stared at the shard, unease stirring in him. "Then it should be destroyed, not studied." "Would that we could," said Terwyn. "But no fire of this world can unmake what was wrought in Angband's forge. Not even dragon fire, they say." As she spoke, the light within the fragment flickered, as though it heard and mocked them. Erendilion drew back. "Cover it," he said sharply. "Let it not look upon us." Terwyn veiled it in a cloth of silver, and the red glow vanished. Yet both felt the chill that lingered. Days passed, and though peace returned to the halls, whispers grew among the people. Strange dreams troubled their sleep, visions of fire beneath the mountains, and of eyes watching from the dark. Some claimed to hear faint voices in the stone, calling them by name. Then one night, The guards at the northern watch reported seeing a lone figure upon the far ridge, tall and cloaked, his face hidden. When they raised their horns, he vanished like mist. The next morning, Finrod summoned Erendilion once more. "It seems the shadow has not withdrawn," the king said gravely. "Scouts have found fresh tracks along the upper Narog, light and many, as though elves walk who do not tire. I fear Morgoth's craft is not yet ended." Erendilion bowed low. "Then send me again, my lord. Let me hunt what remains." Finrod regarded him long, and at last he nodded. "Go, but be wary. The foe has lost one hand, only to stretch forth another. If there are new spies abroad, they will not be easily unmasked." Thus, for the second time, Erendilion set forth from Nargothrond, though now he went with only 2 companions, Lhaegor the Silent, and Tyrwin the Steadfast. Together they followed the river north, their hearts heavy, but their purpose clear. The stars burned cold above them, and the wind out of the north carried again that faint scent of ash. The world slept still under the veil of peace, but in the far distance, beneath the roots of Thangorodrim, Morgoth's forges thundered once more, and deep in the secret places of the world, something stirred that had not yet forgotten the taste of fire. The morning broke grey and cold as Erendilion and his 2 companions followed the river Narog northward. Mist lay heavy upon the water, coiling about the reeds like pale smoke. The trees rose close on either side, their branches interwoven to form a shadowed roof above the stream. The world was hushed, save for the murmur of the current and the faint sighing of the wind. They moved swiftly, silent as ghosts. Lhaegor led, his keen eyes searching the damp earth for any sign of passage. Behind him walked Tyrwin, her cloak drawn close, her white hands hidden in the folds. Erendilion followed last, watchful and grim. Though his wounds from the battle beneath Dorthonion had long since healed, the memory of fire and shadow clung to him still. By midday they reached a place where the river narrowed between steep walls of stone. Here the path climbed sharply, and the roar of hidden waters filled the air. Lhaegor halted suddenly, his hand raised. "There," he whispered. "Look upon the slope." Erendilion followed his gaze. At first he saw nothing but moss and root, but then he discerned faint prints in the soft earth. Light steps, many together, all passing northward. "Not orcs," said Lhaegor. "Their tread is too even. And see, no claws, no dragging of chains." Tyrwin knelt, brushing aside the leaves. "Elvish feet," she said softly. "But where do they go? There is no road here, nor any house of our kin." "Perhaps," Erendilion answered, "they go where none should." They pressed on, following the trail as it wound upward along the gorge. The tracks led them to a narrow pass between the cliffs, half hidden by hanging vines. Beyond it lay a small vale, green and quiet. A spring bubbled from the rock, feeding a pool clear as glass. About the water stood many tall stones, set in a circle like watchers turned to stone. Lhaegor's face darkened. "I know this place," he said. "It is called Lithlad's Hollow. The Sindar avoid it. They say voices whisper here when the moon is full." Tyrwin glanced about uneasily. "Then we walk in haunted ground." Erendilion stepped forward, studying the stones. Each was carved with faint runes, though time had worn them near away. At their center lay a flat slab of rock, stained dark as if by fire. "This was once a place of warding," he murmured, "perhaps raised in the elder days, when the dwarves delved these hills. But its power is long faded." As he spoke, the air seemed to stir. A low hum rose, so faint at first that they might have thought it the wind. Yet it grew, deepening into a murmur like distant voices speaking just beyond hearing. Tyrwin's eyes widened. "Erendilion," she whispered. "Something moves beneath the stone." He laid his hand upon the slab. It was cold, yet beneath that coldness was a trembling, as of life stirring in sleep. Then, clear and soft, came a voice, not from without, but from within his mind. "Captain of Nargothrond, you have seen the halls unseen. You know the fire that dwells beneath the earth. Why come you again when all is not yet forgotten?" Erendilion drew back sharply, his hand going to his sword. "Who speaks?" The voice did not answer. Instead, the pool beside the stone shivered, and in its depths a faint image took shape. A face pale and sorrowful, the eyes dark as midnight. Tyrwin gasped, "Eldarion!" But it was not the twisted creature they had slain. The face that looked upon them now was untainted, fair and sorrowful, like the elf he had been before the fall. "Do not fear," said the apparition. "My body is gone, but my spirit lingers where it was bound. You broke the ring, but its echo remains. Even now it calls to those who walk in shadow. They gather again, seeking the forges that sleep beneath the northern hills." Legor took a step back. "Spirits of the dead are not to be trusted." Erendilion raised a hand. "Let him speak. If truth lies in him, we must know." Eldarion's shade looked upon them with pity. "You cannot fight what you do not see. Beneath the ruins of the halls unseen lies another way, a passage that leads west, beneath the roots of Ered Gorgoroth. There, Morgoth's servants labor still, forging rings of binding for his spies. They are not of great power, yet through them he may sow deceit among your kind. Even now, one of your own carries such a token unwittingly." "Who?" Erendilion demanded. But the spirit's voice faltered, as if a shadow passed over the pool. "Beware the friend whose eyes shine too bright, the flame that burns without warmth." His image blurred, the water rippling. "They come! I cannot—" The pool went still, and the voice was gone. For a moment, none spoke. The only sound was the wind sighing through the stones. At last, Tyrwin said, "We must tell Finrod. If Morgoth forges again, he must know." Erendilion shook his head. "No, the king is guarded by many, and if one among them bears such a ring, to speak openly may doom us all. We must go first and see with our own eyes." Legor frowned. "You would descend again into the north? You swore never to return." "I swore to protect our realm," Erendilion replied. "If the enemy's craft grows beneath our feet, then I will root it out, though I walk once more in shadow." So they turned from Lithlad's Hollow and began their journey toward the northern wilds. For many days they traveled unseen, keeping to the forests and the lesser-known paths. They passed through regions long abandoned since the wars of old, valleys choked with briar, broken towers standing lonely upon the hills. Each night, as they made their camp, Erendilion felt the weight of unseen eyes upon him. On the 6th night, as they camped by a stream under a waning moon, Legor woke with a start. "Someone walks in the dark," he hissed, seizing his bow. They listened, and faintly they heard the tread of feet, soft, measured, and near. A figure stepped into the firelight, a tall elf, cloaked in grey, his hair silver as frost. "Hail, travelers of Nargothrond," he said, his voice calm. "I am Cerdor, warden of the northern marches. Your passing has not gone unseen." Erendilion regarded him warily. "Then speak, Cerdor. What brings you so far from your watch?" The stranger's eyes gleamed faintly in the firelight. "I might ask the same. Few of Finrod's captains come this way now, since the roads grew perilous." "We seek the ruins beneath Dorthonion. Erendilion said. "There are tidings of darkness stirring once more." Círdan nodded slowly. "Then your path and mine are one. For even as you come north, I come south, bearing warning. There are whispers among the hills, shapes seen by moonlight, and songs in tongues long forgotten. The earth trembles as if restless." Tywin studied him closely. "If that is so, then you know more than you say." Círdan smiled faintly. "Perhaps. The north is not as it was, lady. The old wards fail, and the forges of the Dark Ones smolder again. Yet take heart. There are still those who fight unseen." He seated himself by the fire, and as the flames rose higher, Erendilion saw upon his hand a glint of metal, a small ring, black and dull, half hidden beneath his glove. The sight struck him like a blow. The words of Eldarion's shade echoed in his mind. "Beware the friend whose eyes shine too bright." Erendilion's hand went to his sword, but he did not draw it. He only watched, his heart heavy with dread. For the firelight flickered upon Círdan's face, and though he smiled still, there was no warmth in his eyes. The night deepened, and the shadows around the camp seemed to lean closer, listening. In the silence, Erendilion knew that the hunt had begun anew, and that the darkness he thought buried was walking beside him once more. The fire burned low that night, its light no more than a trembling gleam upon the faces of those who sat about it. Erendilion lay wakeful, though he feigned sleep. Across the circle, the newcomer Círdan sat unmoving, his gaze fixed upon the flames. The faint glint of the ring on his hand caught the dying light, and with each flicker it seemed to pulse, dull, rhythmic, as though alive. Erendilion's thoughts raced like storm winds. Could this be the very device of which Eldarion's spirit had spoken? Yet if Círdan was truly ensnared, to move against him now might bring ruin. Tywin lay not far away, her face calm in slumber, but even in rest her fingers clutched the small knife at her side. Legor kept the second watch, perched upon a stone beyond the firelight. An arrow knocked loosely on the string. Hours passed. The moon climbed high, silvering the mist. And then, as if called by some unseen will, Círdan rose. He turned toward the north and began to walk, silent as a shadow. Erendilion followed. He moved swiftly but without sound, his feet light upon the moss. The trees thickened, their trunks black against the pale mist. Ahead, Círdan's cloak drifted like smoke through the shadows, leading him ever upward toward the bare slopes of Dorthonion. At last, they came to a ledge overlooking a deep ravine. The moonlight revealed a sheer descent into blackness, where faint vapors rose from cracks in the earth. Círdan halted at the edge and lifted his hand. From his lips came a whisper, not in the speech of elves, nor of men, but in the harsh and broken tongue of Morgoth's thralls. The sound chilled Erendilion's blood. The ring upon Círdan's hand gleamed faintly red. The ground trembled, and from the depths of the ravine came an answering pulse of light, slow, like the beating of a buried heart. Then Erendilion understood. The forges were not dead. The servants of Angband had tunneled deep beneath these hills, rekindling the fire in secret, and through the rings they called to one another, weaving a net of will and deceit across the lands. "Círdan," Erendilion said, stepping from the shadows. His voice was low, but it carried. "What flame is this you serve?" The warden turned slowly. His eyes glowed faintly beneath the moon, pale and distant. "You should not have followed me, friend," he said. "The North remembers its master. The fire that sleeps shall soon awaken, and all the proud towers of the Noldor will fall like leaves before the storm." "Cast off that ring," Erendilion commanded. You are no thrall yet. Fight its will." Círdan laughed softly, though there was no mirth in it. "You think I am bound? Nay, I am chosen. Morgoth gives power to those who serve him. Once I was a watcher of the north, forgotten by my kin. Now I see farther than Finrod ever dreamed. Through me, the Dark Lord looks upon your king's secret halls." Arundilian drew his sword, its edge gleaming like frost. "Then you see your death approaching." Círdan raised his hand, and a wave of searing heat swept from the ring. The grass blackened, and sparks flew as the ground cracked beneath their feet. Arundilian leapt aside, the flames licking at his cloak. He rushed forward, blade flashing. Círdan met him with his own sword, black and thin as shadow. The two clashed upon the edge of the precipice, steel ringing in the still night. For a long while, neither gained the upper hand. Arundilian fought with the skill of the Noldor, swift and sure, but Círdan's strength was uncanny. His wounds did not slow him, and the air about him shimmered with heat. "Do you not see?" Círdan cried. "Even now the long peace crumbles. The sons of Fëanor stir in wrath, the east is restless, and the north burns beneath unseen fire. What hope have you against the will that made the world?" "I have hope still," Arundilian said, "for light may fade, but it does not die." He feinted left and struck low, cutting through the tendons of Círdan's knee. The warden stumbled, and Arundilian's blade swept upward, severing the ringed hand. A scream tore from Círdan's throat, high and terrible. The ring fell, rolling toward the edge, and then, as if drawn by some hunger of its own, it leapt into the chasm below. A flash of red light erupted from the depths, and a wave of heat burst outward. The cliff shuddered. Arundilian threw himself aside as the rock beneath Círdan crumbled away. The warden fell without a cry, vanishing into the fire-lit dark. Then all was still. The tremors faded, leaving only the sighing of the wind through the pines. Arundilian stood alone upon the broken ledge, his sword red with reflected fire. Far below, the light dwindled and died, swallowed by the blackness. When he returned to the camp, dawn was breaking pale over the hills. Légor met him first, his bow in hand. "You followed him," he said quietly. "What came of it?" "The fire beneath Dorthonion still burns," Arundilian replied. "But one of its keepers is gone." Tywin approached, her eyes dark with concern. "And the ring?" "Lost," he said. "Cast into the deep. Yet I fear the forge that made it remains. So long as that flame endures, others will rise." They broke camp and began their slow journey westward. For many days they saw no living soul. Yet as they neared the forest of Neldereth, they found strange signs along the way. Trees scorched at the roots, earth turned as though by claws, and here and there fragments of metal half melted into the soil. "It spreads," Légor murmured. "The fire is not buried deep enough." "Then we must find its heart," Arundilian said. "There will be no peace while it smoulders." When at last they came to the high moors of Dorthonion, they found the land scarred and broken, veined with cracks from which faint heat still rose. Amid the blackened stones stood a single archway, half collapsed, bearing the runes of the dwarves. Beyond it, a darkness deeper than night gaped like a wound. "This is the path Eldarion spoke of," Tywin said, her voice hushed. "The western passage. Beneath lies what remains of the forges." Arundilian gazed into the pit. "Then beneath it we shall go. If this is the root of the shadow, we will cut it out, even if the world above forgets our names." They descended once more into the depths of the earth. The air grew heavy and hot, the walls slick with black moisture. Soon even the torches struggled to burn, their flames bending and guttering as if afraid. At last they came to a cavern vast as a cathedral, filled with pillars of molten stone. In the midst of it stood an anvil wrought from iron and obsidian. Around it lay shards of black rings, some broken, some still whole. The forge still glowed, faint but alive, as though waiting for its master's return. Tywin shivered. This is no place for the living. Then we shall end it, said Arundelian. He lifted his sword high, and its edge caught the red light. By Finrod's oath, and the light of Valinor that yet lingers in me, I cast down the fire of the enemy. With all his strength, he struck the anvil. The blow rang like thunder. Cracks raced through the metal, and a burst of flame roared upward, blinding them with its fury. The earth shook, and the forge split apart, spewing molten light. "Run!" Legor cried, seizing Tywin's arm. They fled through the tunnels as the ground collapsed behind them. Fire chased their heels, and the roar of falling stone filled their ears. At last they burst into the night air. The mountains behind them split, sending a plume of red fire skyward that turned the clouds crimson. For a long while they lay upon the earth, gasping. When the tremors ceased, Arundelian rose and looked upon the ruin they had wrought. The hills of Dorthonion burned like a dying forge, and from their depths came no sound but the sigh of wind through cooling stone. "It is done," he said softly. Tywin looked to the rising sun. For now. And though the dawn spread gold across the land, none of them smiled. For they knew the truth of the world, that the fires of Morgoth never die, but sleep only, waiting for the next shadow to wake them. When at last the fires in Dorthonion cooled and the skies cleared, Arundelian and his companions turned south once more. The air was heavy with the scent of burned pine and stone, and behind them the mountains glowed faintly in the dusk, their peaks crowned with smoke. Though the forge was broken and the halls unseen buried anew, their hearts were troubled, for none of them felt that the shadow had truly passed. They traveled through lands empty of song. No birds called and no beasts stirred. Only the wind moved, whispering faintly through the dead trees. On the third night, they came upon the ruins of an ancient watchpost built by the Sindar in the elder days. Half its walls had fallen, and ivy hung thick over the stones. There they made camp, for Tywin's strength was failing. The long flight through the fire had left her pale and hollow-eyed, though she uttered no complaint. As they sat by the small flame they dared to kindle, Legor turned to Arundelian. "We have broken one forge," he said quietly. "But you know as I do that Morgoth's works are not so easily ended. What will you do now?" Arundelian looked into the fire. "We return to Nargothrond. Finrod must hear of this. It may be that only with the aid of the wise can we prevent this evil from spreading anew." Legor nodded, though doubt clouded his eyes. "If it has not already spread." The next day dawned pale, veiled in thin mist. They walked in silence, following the old elven road that wound southward through the heather-clad hills. The land seemed changed since last they passed, older, wearier, as though it too bore memory of the shadow beneath. By evening, the mist thickened until they could scarce see a dozen paces ahead. The world grew dim and soundless. Even their footfalls were muffled, swallowed by the white haze. At last, Legor halted, his voice a whisper. "We are not alone." Arundelian drew his sword. "What do you sense?" "Movement. Behind us, and to the left." They stood still, listening. For a long moment there was a nothing. Then from the mist came a soft sound, the creak of leather, the scrape of metal on stone. A faint shape drifted near, tall, cloaked and silent. Another followed, and another, until the shadows of many surrounded them. Tyrwin's hand went to her bow. Orcs? No, Erendilion said, his voice low. They move too quietly, and their eyes, see how they glimmer. The nearest figure stepped forward, and the mist parted like a curtain. It was an elf, tall and fair, his face pale as marble. But his eyes were strange, dark and empty, without light or warmth. Upon his breast gleamed a small shard of black metal set into a chain. Erendilion's heart turned cold. Thralls, he breathed. They have risen again. The pale elf spoke, his voice smooth and hollow. You broke our master's forge, yet his fire lives in us. The shards of his making are many, and they remember their purpose. The will of Angband cannot die. Legor's blade leapt from its sheath. Then you will find your end here. The thralls moved as one, swift as shadows. Steel clashed in the mist. Erendilion fought at the forefront, his sword a streak of silver. He struck down one foe, then another. Yet they didn't cry out. Their blood was black and cold, smoking as it touched the ground. "Tyrwin," he called. "Use the light." From her pouch, she drew a small vial, filled with the pale radiance of starlight. One of the phials blessed by Finrod himself. She flung it high, and the light burst forth, driving back the mist. The thralls shrieked and faltered, their forms wavering. Some fled into the shadows, but others pressed on, heedless of pain. Erendilion saw one rush at Tyrwin with a broken spear. He sprang forward, but too late. The point grazed her arm, tearing her sleeve. She cried out, and where the wound touched her skin, the flesh blackened. "Back!" he shouted, cutting the attacker down. "They bear poison of sorcery." Legor loosed his last arrow, felling another. Then the mist swirled, and the enemy melted away like smoke, vanishing into the darkness from which they had come. The silence that followed was heavy and unnatural. Tyrwin sank to her knees, clutching her arm. The blackness spread like veins of ink. "It burns," she whispered. Erendilion knelt beside her. "Hold still." He poured clear water upon the wound, but it hissed as if touching hot iron. "This is no mortal poison," he said grimly. Legor looked to the north, where the last of the mist was retreating. "They did not come to slay us. They came to deliver a mark, a warning." Erendilion met his gaze. "Or a curse." They moved on, though Tyrwin's strength waned with each step. By the time they reached the borderlands near Bretel, she could walk no more. They made a shelter beneath the roots of an ancient oak. Her skin was pale as snow now, her breath shallow. "Do not fear," Erendilion said, though his voice trembled. "We are near the Narog. I will bring you to Finrod's healers." Tyrwin's eyes fluttered open. "No," she whispered. "Listen. The poison is not of the body alone. I feel it within the spirit. It calls to the fire that sleeps beneath the earth. If I cross your gates, it will follow." He grasped her hand. "You will not die here." She smiled faintly. "All things die, Captain, but some light remains, even when the flame burns low." She drew from her pouch a second phial, twin to the first. Its light flickered weakly, pale as dawn. "Take this. When the darkness rises again, break it. It will guide you." He took it with shaking hands. "Tyrwin." But she was already fading. Her eyes closed, and the light about her dimmed. When he looked again, she was gone, her body fallen still, her face serene, as though in sleep. Legor laid a hand upon Erendilion's shoulder. "She is beyond the reach of sorrow now." Erendilion bowed his head. "And I am not." They buried her beneath the oak, laying leaves upon her grave. Erendilion placed her bow beside her, and the phial she had carried first he set at her breast, where it glowed softly, like a star fallen to earth. When their task was done, they stood in silence. Then Legor spoke. "What now, Captain? Do we return?" Arundelian looked north, where the hills lay dark beneath the stars. "No, I will not bring this shadow to Nargothrond until I know its full measure. Finrod's realm must not fall through ignorance. We go on, to the mountains, and beyond if we must." Legor's face was pale, but he nodded. "Then I go with you, as I swore." So together they turned once more toward the desolate north, their hearts heavy, their hope dim. Behind them, the light of the buried phial shone faintly through the earth, and the night wind sighed among the trees. And far away, in the deep caverns of Angband, the forges stirred anew. The hammering began again, slow, measured, patient. The voice of Morgoth's servants rose in dark song, forging new chains for hearts yet unbroken. Though the halls unseen were gone, their echo lived on, carried by those who had looked upon the flame and could not forget. And so the shadow lengthened once more over Beleriand, unseen by kings, unspoken in song, but felt by all who dreamed of fire. Days turned into weeks as Arundelian and Legor journeyed once more into the bleak and bitter north. Behind them lay the grave of Tyrwin, wrapped in silence and starlight, and before them stretched the long, empty lands of Dorthonion, scarred by fire, haunted by mist, and steeped in the memory of dread. The wind was cold and restless, sighing through the blackened pines like a voice that mourned unendingly. They moved with caution, for the land was not as it once had been. Strange tracks crossed their path, footprints that sank deep into the earth yet led nowhere, as though their makers had vanished into air. At times they glimpsed faint glimmers in the distance, lights that danced among the hills, blue and cold, fading when approached. Legor spoke little, though his keen eyes missed nothing. Arundelian, burdened with grief, pressed onward with a grim resolve. At night they camped beneath the twisted boughs, and Arundelian would sit long in silence, holding the second phial that Tyrwin had given him. Its light was dim now, as though veiled, but when he gazed upon it, faint warmth stirred in his heart. One evening, as the dusk thickened into night, Legor returned from scouting the ridge. His face was pale. "There is movement ahead," he said. "A company, small, perhaps 6 or 7. They bear torches, but their fire burns blue." "Orcs?" asked Arundelian. Legor shook his head. "No, their gait is strange, measured, too deliberate, and they carry no sound of speech." "Thralls again," Arundelian murmured. He rose, fastening his cloak. "We follow them. If they are bound to Angband's will, they may lead us to what remains of the forges." They moved in silence, shadowing the distant glow through the ravines. The moon was thin and cold, hanging like a blade above the peaks. Soon the torchlight ahead descended into a deep hollow, where the ground fell away into a basin ringed by cliffs. There, in the gloom below, they saw the faint shimmer of water, a lake, black and still, reflecting the pale sky. The torchbearers halted upon its shore. Arundelian and Legor crouched among the rocks above, watching. The figures cast their lights into the water and began to chant in low, unearthly tones. "What do they?" whispered Legor. Arundelian's eyes narrowed. "Summoning." The chant grew louder, and the surface of the lake rippled. Then, from its heart, a light arose. Not bright, but red, like an ember glimpsed through ash. The water boiled, steam curling upward. Slowly, a shadow took form beneath the surface, a great shape, vast and formless, stirring in the depths. "Back!" Arundelian hissed. But even as they moved, one of the torchbearers turned, his hollow eyes glinting. "They see us," said Legor. The thralls raised their torches high, and a cry went up, a sound not of voices, but of metal striking stone. The air shook, and the red light flared. The lake erupted in flame. Out of the water rose a figure, tall as a tower, its body black as iron and veined with fire. Wings of smoke unfurled behind it, and from its eyes burned twin coals of hatred. The very sight of it chilled the blood. "A Balrog," Legor whispered, his voice trembling. "By the valor." Erendilion felt the heat sear his face, even at that distance. "No," he said hoarsely. "Not one of the old lords. This is but a lesser spirit, a remnant of the flame that served Morgoth's hand, yet deadly enough." The creature raised its burning whip, and the thralls fell prostrate before it. Its voice thundered through the valley like the roar of an open furnace. "Who dares break the silence of my fire?" The sound struck them to their knees. Erendilion clutched the phial to his chest. "Run!" he cried. "This is beyond us." They fled up the rocky slope as the ground shook beneath their feet. Behind them, the Balrog turned its gaze upon the cliffs, and the whip lashed forth. Stone shattered, flame burst, and the night was torn by light and thunder. They reached the summit and dove behind a ridge as the creature's wrath swept the land. Fire poured down into the hollow, consuming the thralls who had summoned it. Their screams echoed once and were gone. The lake boiled dry, leaving only a pit of molten stone. When at last the earth grew still, Erendilion lifted his head. The valley below was a ruin of smoke and flame, yet the Balrog was gone. Only its trail of burning footsteps led westward, toward the far hills. Legor wiped the soot from his brow. "It walks the land now. What hope remains?" Erendilion's voice was low. "Hope lies where it always has, beyond despair. That creature is a servant without master, yet its purpose endures. It will seek the remnants of Angband's craft. We must follow." Through the night they tracked the Balrog's passage. Forests burned in its wake. Stone melted beneath its tread. Yet it moved not swiftly, as though still waking from a long sleep. By dawn they reached the edge of a ravine where the trail vanished. Below, hidden among the shadows, stood a fortress of black stone, new built, but bearing the marks of dwarven craft. Its gates were half closed, and smoke drifted from vents in the cliffside. "Dwarves?" Legor murmured. "No," said Erendilion, his eyes dark. "Those who built this serve another hand. See, upon the lintel, the mark of the eye." The same sigil they had seen in the halls unseen was carved there, faint but clear, a circle of fire enclosing a single, weeping eye. "Morgoth's servants dig once more," he said. "This is their new forge." Legor's face was grim. "Then we strike now, while it is yet unguarded." Erendilion shook his head. "We are but two, and the fire walks near. To rush in is folly. We must learn first what evil stirs within." For 3 days they watched from the heights. The fortress thrummed with secret life. Shapes moved within its walls, and sometimes they heard the clang of hammers deep below. Once they saw the Balrog return, its flames dimmed, entering through the gate as though taking command of its kin. At last Erendilion spoke. "We cannot wait. Every hour strengthens their hand. If this forge is not broken, all Beleriand will know its fire." Legor nodded. "Then we die doing what must be done." By night they descended into the ravine. Clouds shrouded the moon, and a cold wind swept through the crags. They reached the gate unseen, for the sentries were few, and the dread of the Balrog kept even its servants from lingering long outside. Erendilion pressed his ear to the stone and heard the faint roar of fire within. Now, he whispered. Together they slipped through the narrow breach. The passage led downward, lit by veins of molten rock that ran through the walls. The heat was suffocating, and the air tasted of ash. At the end of the passage, the tunnel opened into a vast cavern, and there they saw the forge. It blazed with a terrible light. Upon the anvils lay chains of black steel, and upon the walls hung new forged rings, cooling in their molds. At the center stood the Balrog, its form towering, hammering upon an anvil with blows that shook the stone. Sparks flew, each spark taking shape as a small shadow that crawled away into the dark. "By Eru," whispered Legor, awestruck. "It forges servants from fire itself." Erendilion's gaze hardened. "Then let fire devour fire." He drew the phial from his breast, its light trembling like a captive star. "Tywin, guide me now!" He hurled the phial toward the forge. It burst in midair, and for an instant the cavern was filled with white brilliance, pure and cold. The Balrog roared, staggering back as the light struck it. The molten metal hissed and froze. The shadows shrieked and withered. "Run!" Erendilion cried, seizing Legor's arm. The fire roared to life again, angrier than before. The Balrog's wings flared, sweeping the air like storm clouds. Flames chased them through the tunnels as they fled upward, the roar of wrath echoing behind. Stones fell, the ground shuddered. They burst from the gate just as the mountains split with thunder. A torrent of flame erupted, lighting the night for leagues. The fortress collapsed into itself, swallowed by fire. The roar faded, leaving only the hiss of cooling stone. They lay upon the mountainside, breathless and scorched. Lygor turned to Erendilion, a faint smile upon his soot-streaked face. "Twice you've buried Morgoth's forges. Perhaps that is enough to earn a song." Erendilion stared at the burning ruin. "No song will last long enough," he said softly. "But let it be known that light still answers darkness." Far away, in the hidden halls of Nargothrond, Finrod Felagund stirred from uneasy dreams, and for a moment thought he heard distant thunder rolling from the north. Yet he could not know that, beneath those dying fires, a single ember still burned, hidden deep, waiting for another age to wake. When the mountain fire had at last gone still, the world lay wrapped in silence. The black smoke drifted slowly upward, dimming the stars, and the ruins of the forge glowed faintly, like a wound half-healed. Erendilion stood upon the slope, the cold wind tugging at his cloak, and looked down upon what they had wrought. The land was broken, the stones still burning with dull light beneath the ash. Legor sat nearby, his arm bound where the flame had grazed him. He was pale but alive, his eyes fixed upon the rising smoke. "It is done," he murmured. "The forges of the north are ended." "Ended?" Erendilion echoed. "Perhaps. Yet I fear the spirit that wrought them is not so easily destroyed. Evil does not die. It hides and waits." Legor gave a grim smile. "Then it will find us waiting also." They turned southward again, for their task was complete, and the road to Nargothrond called them home. Yet as they went, Erendilion felt a strange unease. The wind was wrong, too warm, too full of scent, as if it passed through unseen fires. More than once he thought he heard whispers in the gusts, faint and mocking, and at night when he slept, dreams of flame came to him. They descended through Dorthonian's lower slopes, where the trees grew sparse and twisted. Once, these forests had been green and fair, but now they were blackened, the leaves brittle and silent underfoot. In the hollows of the hills, small fires still smouldered, and the air reeked of smoke and ash. By the seventh day, the land softened into the high meadows of Talath Dirnan, where the first snows of winter lay thin upon the grass. There they found a small stream running clear between its frozen banks. Arundelian knelt to drink, but as he leaned down, he caught a glint beneath the water, a flash of red, like an ember seen through glass. He reached into the stream and drew forth a shard of metal, black and smooth, warm to the touch. Legor's voice was sharp. "Cast it away. The fire still clings to it." Arundelian stared at the shard, frowning. It was no ring, nor any clear fragment of craft. Rather, it seemed as though some living shadow had taken shape in metal and then cooled into stillness. "It should not exist," he said softly. "The forge was destroyed, yet here lies its memory." He wrapped the piece in cloth and placed it within his pouch. "We will bear it to Finrod. If any among the Noldor can discern its nature, it is he." So they travelled onward, crossing the plain and following the Narog's winding course. The days grew shorter, the nights long and bitter, yet hope stirred faintly in their hearts as the forests of Nargothrond came once more into sight. But even as they drew near, Arundelian felt the weight of unseen eyes upon them. Once, while crossing a narrow glen, Legor paused and pointed toward the ridge above. "There," he whispered. Against the pale sky stood a figure cloaked in black, motionless. For a moment it seemed carved of stone. Then it raised an arm, as if in salute, and was gone. Legor's hand went to his bow. A spy of Morgoth, no doubt. "Or a shade," said Arundelian. "The world grows full of them." When they reached the hidden gates of Nargothrond at last, the guards received them with astonishment and joy, for they had been thought long dead. Word spread swiftly through the caverns, and soon Finrod himself came to meet them in the great hall, his golden hair gleaming in the torchlight. "Welcome home, my friends," said the king. "You have walked in shadow and returned. Tell me what you have seen." So Arundelian recounted all: the new forge beneath the mountains, the awakening of the fire spirit, and the ruin that followed. He spoke also of Tyrwen's death, and of the shard they had found in the river. When he drew it forth, the light of the torches dimmed, and a hush fell over the hall. Finrod took the cloth with care and unwrapped it. The black metal gleamed faintly, a red pulse beating within. "Strange indeed," he said softly. "It is not of dwarven craft, nor wholly of the enemy's making. There is something of the world itself in it. Fire and shadow bound together." He turned to Arundelian. "You have done much, yet this work is not ended. I will set this relic under guard and study it if I may. But keep watch, for the shadow you have fought may follow." That night, a feast was held in their honor. The hall of Nargothrond rang with song once more, though sorrow touched every melody. The minstrels sang of Tyrwen the Brave, who gave her light to destroy the darkness. Arundelian listened in silence, his thoughts far away. When the feast ended, he walked alone beside the river that flowed through the caverns. Its waters shone silver in the lamplight, and he saw again the reflection of the shard's faint glow in his mind. The current whispered softly, carrying with it the echo of distant thunder. As he stood there, a figure came silently from the shadows. It was Finrod. "You cannot rest," said the king gently. Arundelian bowed his head. "How can I, when every battle I fight seems only to awaken another? I have broken 2 forges, yet their fire still lives." Finrod laid a hand upon his shoulder. "So it ever is, my friend. The work of the enemy is like the sea. It cannot be emptied, only held at bay. But do not despair. Every act of courage weakens his will, though we see it not." Arundelian looked into the river. "If that is true, then may the light of those who have fallen not fade in vain." Finrod smiled faintly. "It will not. Tyrwin's light burns now among the stars. In the days that followed, the shard was placed within the deepest vault of Nargothrond, sealed by the king's own hand. Yet strange things soon began to stir. The guards posted near the vault spoke of whispers in the night, and of dreams filled with fire. The air near the sealed door grew warm, and faint glows were seen beneath the stone. One evening, as Erendilion walked the upper halls, a tremor passed through the earth. Lamps flickered, and a low hum filled the caverns. The sound seemed to rise from the very heart of the fortress. He hurried to the vault and found Finrod already there, the door unsealed. Within, the stone floor glowed faintly red. The shard lay upon its pedestal, pulsing with light, stronger than before. "It grows," Finrod said, his face grave. "The power within it wakens. It is not merely a relic. It is a seed." "A seed of what?" "Of fire," said Finrod, "and of will. Perhaps a fragment of the very spirit that forged the rings. If it is not quenched, it may call again to its master." Erendilion's hand went to his sword. "Then we destroy it now, before it is too late." Finrod shook his head. "If we strike without understanding, we may release what lies within. Its nature is bound to the very roots of Arda. To unmake it might rouse a greater fire still." "Then what are we to do?" Erendilion demanded. "For now," said Finrod, "we guard it, and we wait. The shadow has turned its gaze toward us once more, and we must meet it with wisdom, not haste." As they sealed the vault again, Erendilion looked upon the glowing stone and felt a chill. The light within it seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, steady and patient. That night, as the halls of Nargothrond slept, the faint warmth spread through the stone, unnoticed. The river murmured softly through the caverns, and far to the north, beyond the ruined mountains, the wind carried a whisper, low and distant, like laughter in the dark. The forges were gone, but the fire endured. The winter that followed was long and heavy upon the lands of Beleriand. Snow lay deep upon the high passes, and the Narog ran dark and slow beneath its sheathing of ice. Yet beneath the stone halls of Nargothrond, warmth lingered, a faint heat that no hearth had kindled. The guards whispered of it in unease, for the air grew thick and restless, and sometimes, at night, they heard the murmur of something deep within the earth, like a distant forge awakening from sleep. Finrod Felagund took counsel with his wisest captains and lawmasters, but none could name the cause save one. "It is the shard," said Erendilion. "It grows stronger with each passing day. We have sealed it away, but its will is not bound. The darkness within hungers." Finrod frowned, his fair brow shadowed by care. "I have felt it too," he said. "When I walk the lower halls, it is as if the stone itself breathes with heat. The songs of my people falter, and fear walks beside the river." "Then let us cast it into the depths," Erendilion urged. "Let it be drowned and forgotten." The king shook his head. "Would that it were so simple. The shard cannot be destroyed by any art of ours. To cast it into water might cool it for a time, but water will not quench what was born of fire immortal. No, if we act in haste, we may rouse it further." Erendilion turned away, his hands clenched. "Then we do nothing, and wait for it to master us?" Finrod's voice was calm, though sorrowed. "No, we watch, and we learn. If we are to defeat this shadow, we must understand its root." So the shard remained sealed, though its light waxed day by day, pulsing faintly beneath the vaults like a heartbeat in stone. Weeks passed, and the unrest among the people grew. The forges of Nargothrond, once alive with song and craft, fell silent. The smiths complained that their fires burned too hot, melting the iron before the hammer could fall. The healers spoke of strange fevers, of dreams filled with red light. Even the beasts of the caverns, horses, hounds, and the white birds that nested near the river, grew restless and fled deeper into shadow. Then came a night when Arundelian, unable to sleep, walked the darkened corridors alone. The lamps had burned low, and only the dim reflection of the river guided his path. As he passed near the vault, he heard a sound, a soft whispering, like voices speaking far away. He halted, straining to listen. The words were in no tongue he knew, yet they filled him with dread, for they carried the rhythm of flame. He felt warmth upon his face, and saw, through the narrow seam of the vault's door, a faint red glow. He reached for the seal, but before he could touch it, the light flared, blinding. The stone shuddered beneath his hand, and from within came a low, thunderous hum, as though something vast stirred in its sleep. He staggered back, drawing his sword, but the sound faded as swiftly as it had come. The door grew dark again. For a long moment he stood there, trembling, then turned and fled to the upper halls. At dawn he went before the king and told what he had seen. Finrod listened in silence, his face grave. "The shard has woken," he said at last. "Its fire spreads unseen. We must act before it consumes us." He summoned his council, and among them came the lords of the house of Finarfin, the captains of the watch, and the wise woman Araneth, skilled in the songs of warding. Together they descended to the vault, carrying with them vessels of silver filled with water from Eithel Ivrin, the sacred spring of Ulmo. When they broke the seal, the light that poured forth was terrible. The shard had grown. It no longer lay still, but floated above the stone, turning slowly in the air. From it streamed thin ribbons of red fire that curled like smoke and sank into the walls. Finrod raised his hand, and his voice rang clear. "By the light of the 2 trees that my house once beheld, I command thee, spirit of fire, be still." For a moment, the light quivered. The hum deepened. Then the shard spoke. Its voice was not one, but many. Whispers mingled, a chorus of echoes. "You cannot bind me, Elf King. The world itself is my forge. I was born of the first flame, and through me the will of the Dark One endures." The torches guttered. The air grew hot. Finrod's captains fell back, shielding their faces. But Araneth stepped forward, raising her hands. From her lips came a song, a long, low chant in the tongue of the Valar, a song of water and wind. Her voice was pure and strong, and as it rose, the fire dimmed, retreating from her light. Arundelian rushed to her side, his sword drawn. "Hold it fast," he cried. "Do not let it speak." The shard writhed like a living thing. Its light flared, and for an instant the shape of a hand appeared within it. A hand of flame, reaching outward. It struck the floor, and stone burst beneath the blow. Finrod raised his staff and struck the air. A great wind filled the vault, extinguishing the torches. The fire shrieked and twisted, shrinking until it was once more a small, dark crystal, glowing faintly. When silence returned, Araneth fell to her knees, pale and trembling. "It is bound," she whispered, "but not destroyed. Its will is chained for a time only." Finrod nodded wearily. "Then we will use that time. The shard must be taken from here, far from our halls, far from any dwelling of the Noldor. It draws power from our craft, from the very light that dwells within us. Perhaps in a place unlit and barren it will fade." Arundelian stepped forward. "Then I will bear it. It was my hand that brought it hither. and it shall be my burden to carry it away." The king looked upon him with sorrow. "You have done enough, my friend." "Not while the shadow breathes," said Erendilion. "This thing knows me. Its fire has marked me already. If it must have a keeper, let it be one who has looked upon its face before." Finrod was silent a long while. At last he said, "So be it. But you shall not go alone. Take with you Legor and Oreneth, whose song has bound it. Seek a place beyond the Narog's reach, where even the servants of the enemy will not tread." That night, beneath the first pale gleam of the moon, Erendilion and his companions departed from Nargothrond. None saw them go save Finrod himself, who stood upon the high balcony above the gates. His voice followed them as they vanished into the trees. "Go with the blessing of the West. May Ulmo guard your steps, and may the fire you bear find peace." They journeyed north and west, keeping to the hidden paths by night. The shard was sealed within a casket of silver, bound with runes of warding. Yet even so, its warmth bled through the metal, and the air about it shimmered faintly. Wherever they passed, frost melted upon the grass, and the cold of winter fled from their path. By the third night, clouds covered the stars, and the wind rose from the north. In the distance, thunder rumbled, though no storm followed. Araneth, walking last, turned her gaze often behind them, as if she heard a sound none else could. At dawn, they came to the hills above the sea, where the land fell steeply into the waves. There the cliffs were sheer, and the wind carried the salt of the deep waters. Erendilion looked upon the foam below and said, "Here ends our road. The sea is deep, and its strength is not of fire. If any power can claim this thing from the world, it is Ulmo's." They stood upon the brink. The casket pulsed faintly in Erendilion's hands. He lifted it high, and for a moment the red light burned through the silver, fierce and defiant. Then he cast it outward. The wind seized it, bearing it far over the waves. It fell with a hiss and was gone. The sea surged, and the light beneath the waters glimmered once, then faded into darkness. Legor let out a long breath. "It is ended." But Erendilion stood still, his face turned toward the horizon. The wind tore at his hair, and his eyes were shadowed. "No," he said softly. "Nothing wrought by fire is ever truly ended. But perhaps for a time, the sea will remember mercy." And far below, in the cold deeps where no sun reached, a faint glow stirred once more. Like a sleeping ember waiting for breath, the sea swallowed the light, and for a time there was peace. The waves crashed against the cliffs and fell back, foaming white, while the wind cried through the high crags like the voice of something old and weary. Erendilion stood long upon that height, watching the restless waters. The dawn came grey and cold, but no sun rose, only a pale glow veiled by cloud. Behind him, Araneth drew her cloak close, her hair blown by the wind. "It is done," she said softly. "The shard is lost to the deep. Let it sleep now, beneath Ulmo's keeping." Legor, standing apart, gave a low sigh. "If any power can quench that fire, it is the sea. Yet I do not trust what is unseen. Water hides as easily as stone." Erendilion turned from the edge. "It hides, but it does not forget. If the shard stirs again, Ulmo will know it before any other. Our part is finished." But even as he said it, he felt no certainty in his heart. He could still sense the faint warmth in the air, as though the fire had not truly left them, but lingered upon their very breath. The wind carried whispers, no more than the sighing of the waves, perhaps. But it seemed to him that a low voice murmured from the deep, "I am not ended." They made their camp upon the cliffs, for the journey back to Nargothrond would be long. and Araneth was weary from her song of binding. That night, as they sat beside a small fire of driftwood, she spoke softly to Erendilion. "You bear the look of one who has lost more than he can count," she said. He stared into the flames. "I have lost companions, and friends dearer than brothers. But more than that, I have lost faith that any victory endures. We strike at shadow and flame, yet they return, wearing new faces. Such is the way of the world," she said. "The darkness cannot be slain, but neither can the light. They contend forever, and in that struggle we find our purpose." Erendilion gave a faint, weary smile. "You speak as though you have known this battle long." Araneth's gaze turned toward the sea. "I have. I was born in Doriath, beneath the girdle of Melian. I learned from her the songs of protection that guard the unseen borders of the world. Yet even there, peace was but a dream. Shadows crept beneath the leaves, unseen until they struck. The darkness has patience beyond any of us." Laegor stirred the fire with his knife. "Then what hope have we, who live so few years and fight wars without end?" Araneth looked upon him with calm eyes. "The hope of the fleeting dawn," she said. "Each morning rises though the night has not been slain. That is enough." They fell silent, listening to the waves. Far below, the sea beat upon the rocks, a ceaseless rhythm that lulled them into uneasy sleep. In the grey hours before dawn, Erendilion dreamed. He stood upon the same cliffs, but the sea was no longer calm. The waters churned, red as blood, and from the depths a light rose, deep and fiery. A voice called to him, echoing through the wind. "You cannot cast away what was bound to you. The fire knows its master." He reached for his sword, but it was gone. His hands were empty, and his reflection in the dark water did not bear his own face. It was Eldarion's, pale and scarred, the eyes hollow and burning. Then he woke, the cry of gulls in his ears. The sea lay grey and still once more, but his heart was heavy. That day they began their journey south. The road wound through barren hills where the grass grew thin and colourless. The air was sharp with the scent of salt and frost. As they walked, clouds gathered again in the west, dark and low. By nightfall, a storm had risen. The wind howled through the hollows, and the rain fell in sheets, driving them to seek shelter among the ruins of an ancient tower that crowned the hill. Its stones were black with age, its roof long fallen, yet its lower chambers remained sound. There they lit a small fire and wrapped themselves in their cloaks. The storm raged on, and the sea's roar was faintly heard even there, many leagues inland. Erendilion sat awake long after the others had slept. The dream haunted him still, and the memory of the shard's voice lingered in his mind. Then, through the hiss of rain, he heard a faint sound, the crackle of flame where none should be. He turned sharply. The small fire in their hearth burned lower, yet beside it glimmered a light not its own. A single red spark that hovered in the air. It drifted toward him, slow and deliberate, as though carried by unseen will. Erendilion rose, his hand upon his sword. "What trick is this?" he whispered. The spark flared brighter, and in its heart he saw the shape of a hand, the same hand he had glimpsed within the shard in Finrod's vault. It reached toward him, and a voice spoke in his mind. "Did you think the sea would silence me? You cast away the vessel, not the flame. The fire clings to you, bearer of its ruin. Through you, I shall rise anew." Erendilion drew his blade and struck at the air, but the spark split apart into 1,000 smaller lights, scattering like fireflies. The wind rushed through the chamber, extinguishing the hearth. darkness fell, and he was left standing alone, the echo of the voice fading from his thoughts. When dawn came, he told Araneth what had passed. She listened, her face grave. "Then the shard has marked you indeed. Part of its essence dwells in you now, drawn to the fire of your own spirit. You have become its vessel. Then destroy me," he said fiercely. "Better that than to carry its curse back into the world." She shook her head. "No, the fire has chosen you, but it has not yet mastered you. So long as your will is your own, it cannot prevail." Perhaps this was meant to be. Legor frowned. Meant by whom? No Valar send such gifts. "Not all designs are made in heaven," she said softly. "Some are shaped by the very struggle between light and shadow. He may yet turn the darkness to his purpose." They left the tower and continued south, though the land seemed dimmer than before. Wherever they passed, the frost melted and the air grew heavy, as though a hidden warmth followed in Erendilion's wake. When at last they reached the borders of Nargothrond, Finrod himself met them upon the road. He saw at once the change in Erendilion's countenance, the strange gleam in his eyes, the faint shimmer upon his skin. "What burden do you bring back to my realm?" asked the king. Erendilion knelt. "Only what the sea could not drown. The shard's fire lives still, within me." Finrod's face was troubled. "Then the battle is not ended after all. Yet if the flame has chosen you, perhaps you may turn it to good. The light of the blessed realm still lingers in our kind, and fire, though perilous, may also purify." Erendilion lifted his gaze. "If it may serve, I will wield it. But if it brings only ruin, then I beg you, strike me down before it consumes your halls." Finrod's eyes were full of sorrow. "You will not be slain by my hand. Instead, you shall be my watcher and my sword. The shadow seeks to return. You will stand against it. So long as your will endures, Nargothrond shall not fall to the fire." Thus Erendilion became the hidden flame, the secret guardian of Nargothrond's deep halls. Few knew his purpose, yet wherever danger crept, he was there, his eyes gleaming faintly in the dark. And though the years of the long peace waned, and darker storms gathered in the north, the fire that dwelt within him burned steady, bright enough to light the paths unseen, but never yet out of control. Still, in the depth of his heart, he heard sometimes the murmur of the sea, and beneath it a whisper of heat, waiting, watching, remembering. For in Middle-earth, no flame truly dies. It only sleeps, dreaming of the day when shadow and light shall meet again in fire. Years passed, and the tale of Erendilion's deeds became a murmur among the folk of Nargothrond. Few now remembered the fire of Dorthonion, or the shard that had slept beneath the sea. The long peace, though frail, still held, and under Finrod's wise rule, the caverns of the Narog thrived in secret splendor. Yet within those stone halls, one light never dimmed, the strange, steady flame that burned behind the eyes of Erendilion the Watcher. He walked the tunnels by night, his footfall silent as shadow. The guards saluted him, though few dared meet his gaze for long. The air around him was always warm, even in the deep midwinter, when frost rimed the river's edge. Some said that he had been blessed by the Valar, others that he bore a secret doom. But only Finrod and Araneth knew the truth of what lived within him. The fire had not grown weaker. It had become part of him. There were times when he could feel it stirring, a pulse beneath his heart, slow and deep. In battle it would wake fully, and his blade would blaze like molten gold. Yet afterward he would fall into weariness, and a restlessness gnawed at his spirit. He feared the day it might rise unbidden and consume him. Still, he served. In those days, dark tidings came again from the north. The orcs had grown bold upon the plains, and smoke was seen once more above Thangorodrim. Rumors spoke of Glaurung, the golden worm, breaking from his lair in the Iron Mountains. The long peace trembled upon the edge of ruin. One evening, Finrod summoned Erendilion to his private chamber. The king stood beside the river that ran through his halls, the light of the lanterns shimmering upon the water. His face was grave. "You have heard the rumors," said Finrod. "I have, my lord. The north burns anew." "It is more than rumor," Finrod said quietly. "Our scouts bring word that Morgoth's hosts gather in secret. The Daegor Bragolok draws near. The great battle of sudden flame. It is said that the ground itself burns where his fire-tongued beasts pass. Soon the armies of Angband will pour forth again." Erendilion bowed his head. "Then the fire within me will meet its kin." Finrod regarded him long. "That is what I fear. The flame you bear may answer to the fire of our foes. If Glaurung himself should draw near, he might awaken what you have kept in check these many years. Would you have me hide while others fight?" "I would have you live," said Finrod, and his voice softened. "You have given enough, my friend. Yet I will not forbid you. Each of us must stand where fate demands. Go if you must, but guard your heart." "I will guard it," Erendilion said, though he doubted his own strength. That night he walked upon the battlements above the hidden gate, where the river entered the caverns. Araneth found him there, gazing toward the distant north. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. "You mean to go?" she said. "I cannot remain. The fire was not given to me to hide in darkness." "Then you will march to war with Morgoth's hosts?" "If that is my doom." She stepped close, placing her hand upon his arm. "Then remember what you told me once, that light endures, though victory fades. The fire within you is not wholly of evil, Erendilion. It is both peril and gift. Should it wake in battle, do not resist it. Shape it. Bend it to your will." He looked upon her, and for the first time in many years, he smiled. "You speak as Melian might have spoken." "Then perhaps she guides my words," Araneth said. "Go now, and may the Valar guard you." At dawn he departed with a company of warriors bound for the Northern Watch. Among them rode Legor, grey-haired now but unbowed. Together they crossed the Narog and passed through the forests of Dorthonion, where once their footsteps had echoed through ruin and flame. The land was changed again. New growth had come, but it was dark and twisted, the trees gnarled as if scarred by old fire. They reached the border of Ardgarlan just as the storm broke. It came without warning, a tremor in the earth, a low thunder like the growl of a waking beast. Then from the north, a wall of flame rose against the sky. The air turned to ash, and the wind carried a sound like the roar of dragons. Morgoth's armies poured forth from the Iron Mountains, and the Daegor Bragolok began. All Beleriand was lit by the fire of war. Erendilion and his company were swept into the battle. Orcs came upon them in waves, black against the light. The elves fought bravely, but the ground burned beneath their feet, and many fell. Laegor's arrows flew swift as lightning, each finding its mark, yet the horde was endless. Amid the chaos, Erendilion felt the old fire stir within him. It burned hot, rising through his veins until his sword blazed like a star. The heat did not consume him this time. It answered to his will, flowing like molten gold along the edge of his blade. He waded into the enemy ranks, cutting a path through their number. Orcs fell before him, their cries drowned in the thunder of battle. Those who saw him said afterward that his eyes burned with the light of the Silmarils, and the shadow fled from him as from the dawn. Yet the flame within him didn't stop there. It grew. The fire spread to the ground around him, coiling outward in tongues of gold and red. His own men drew back in awe and fear. Lagor shouted, but his voice was lost in the wind. Erendilion stood at the heart of the blaze, unburnt, his cloak billowing like smoke. Then, through the veil of heat, a deeper shadow moved, a vast shape, wingless yet serpentine, scales of molten bronze, eyes like furnaces. Glaurung, the first of the great dragons, had come. The beast reared, its voice a roar that shook the mountains. "Who among the fools of the Eldar dares bear my fire?" Erendilion raised his sword, one who was marked by it, but not broken. The dragon laughed, a sound of thunder and flame. "Then come, thief of light, let us see whose fire burns truer." Their battle was terrible to behold. Fire met fire, and the plain itself cracked beneath them. Erendilion's blade shone white as the morning star, and every stroke sent sparks like meteors through the smoke. Yet Glaurung's strength was vast, and the heat of his breath scorched the earth. At last, when his strength was near spent, Erendilion drove his sword deep into the dragon's breast. A great cry rang out, and Glaurung fell back, wounded but not slain. His tail struck the ground, sending a shock through the plain, and he fled northward, leaving ruin in his wake. Erendilion stood alone amid the ashes. The fire within him was fading now, spent and dim. Lagor found him kneeling beside the molten earth, his sword blackened, his breath shallow. "You live," Lagor said, falling to his knees. "For now," Erendilion answered faintly, "but the flame has burned its course. It was never mine to keep." He lifted his gaze toward the north, where Glaurung's shadow vanished beyond the horizon. "The fire sleeps again, but it will wake, and when it does, another must stand where I stood." Lagor bowed his head. "You have saved us all." Erendilion smiled weakly. "For a time, that is all any of us can do." As the sun rose through the smoke of the battlefield, the last light fell upon him. His eyes, once bright with the fire's glow, dimmed to grey. And though his body was later borne back to Nargothrond with honor, it was said that when they laid him to rest, his heart was warm still, as though a single ember remained, glowing softly in the dark. And thus passed Erendilion, the hidden flame, whose fire kindled hope even as the world fell to shadow. Yet some whispered that, deep beneath the earth, his light did not fade, that when the darkness of Angband grew greatest, a pale fire flickered once more beneath the mountains, as if waiting for its master's return. Long years had passed since Erendilion fell upon the plains of Ardgailen. His name was sung in the halls of Nargothrond, and remembered in Finrod's heart as one of the noblest of his captains. Yet even song could not hold back the tide of the world's sorrow. The Dagor Bragolach had broken the long peace, and the fire of Morgoth swept across Beleriand like a storm that none could master. The lands north of the Narog were blackened wastelands now. The forests of Dorthonion smouldered still, and the green fields of Ardgailen were turned to dust and ash. Many of the Noldor fled southward. Others fell in battle, their names lost to the wind. Yet Nargothrond endured, hidden still beneath the earth, its king steadfast amid ruin. But the shadow that Erendilion had fought had not wholly departed. For years after his death, Finrod kept watch upon the vaults where once the shard had been imprisoned. They had sealed the chamber with stone and song, laying heavy wards over it. Yet sometimes the guards whispered of a faint warmth in the lower halls, or of strange lights flaring briefly along the river tunnels. No one dared speak of it openly, for fear of troubling the king, who bore grief enough already. One winter night, Finrod himself walked those quiet corridors. He was weary from counsel, and the silence of the deep ways drew him, as it often had. The river ran near, murmuring softly as it passed through the stone. Its sound comforted him. Yet tonight the water's voice seemed changed, lower, more restless, as though it whispered of something hidden. He came at last to the sealed vault. The door was black, bound with silver runes that glimmered faintly in the torchlight. For a long time he stood before it, remembering Erendilion's steadfast eyes and the words he had spoken before his last battle. The fire sleeps again, but it will wake. Finrod laid his hand upon the cold stone. "If you are right, my friend," he murmured, "then may your fire still serve the light." A faint pulse stirred beneath his palm. Startled, he drew back, but the glow of the runes grew brighter, and the air grew warm. A sound rose from beyond the door, a low hum, deep and steady. Then, as Finrod watched, one of the silver sigils cracked. A thin wisp of red light seeped through. He summoned his guards at once, and the vault was sealed anew. Yet in his heart he knew the truth. The fire that Erendilion had carried was not dead. It had found another path, another shape. Days later, as Finrod sat in council with his captains, a messenger was brought before him. A young scout, his cloak torn and his face pale with fear. "My lord," he gasped, "something walks upon the northern borders. It bears no banner and leaves no tracks, yet the air burns where it passes. The beasts flee before it. The very trees burst into flame." A silence fell upon the hall. Finrod rose slowly. "And what shape has this wanderer?" The scout bowed low. "A man's, lord. A tall figure, clad in grey, with eyes like coals. I saw him from afar. He looked upon me once, and I could not move." At those words, Finrod's heart stirred strangely. Could it be? No. Erendilion was gone beyond the circles of the world. Yet in his mind, he remembered the warmth of that last ember they had found in his heart, faint but living. "Send word to the wardens," Finrod said. "No arrows, no swords. Let none harm what they do not understand. I will go myself." So the king of Nargothrond rode forth with a small company and followed the trail north. The path led through the ruined vales, where smoke still rose from the scorched earth. Each night the air grew hotter, though the sky was clear and cold. And on the fourth day, as the sun sank red behind the hills, they saw him. He stood upon a ridge overlooking the desolation, a tall figure robed in ash-grey, his hair streaming like black flame in the wind. Around him, the air shimmered. "Who are you that walk thus unharmed through fire and ruin?" Finrod called. The figure turned slowly. His face was fair and proud, yet strange, neither wholly living nor dead. His eyes burned with steady light, fierce and sorrowful. "Do you not know me, lord?" he said, and his voice carried the echo of a memory Finrod had long buried. A chill passed through the company. Finrod dismounted, staring in wonder. "Erendilion?" The other smiled faintly. "Once I bore that name. But the flame that marked me would not die with flesh. When my body fell upon the plains, the fire sought new life, and in the hour of my death it bound itself to my spirit. I am the echo of that which was, drawn back by the will of the world." Finrod bowed his head. "Then it is true. The fire cannot be quenched." "Nor should it be," said Erendilion. "For though it was born of Morgoth's craft, it has changed. The sea purified it. The light of battle tempered it. I am not his servant. I am what remains when his fire forgets its master." Finrod's heart ached with mingled fear and hope. "Why have you returned?" "To warn you," said the shade. the flame that was mine is not alone. Others stir, smaller lights, kindled by the remnants of the forges we broke. They sleep beneath the mountains still, waiting for the call of darkness. The age of fire is not ended. Then guide us, said Finrod. Show us how to stand against it. Arundelian looked to the north, where the red glow of Angband's fires stained the horizon. You cannot stand forever. The fire will spread, and even Nargothrond will not be spared. But remember this. Every light that falls into darkness leaves an echo. When your own hour comes, King of the Deep Halls, look for that echo, and it will lead you beyond the shadow. As he spoke, the air around him began to shimmer like heat over the desert. The light in his eyes dimmed, softening to gold. Will you not remain? Finrod asked. We have need of your strength. My strength was spent long ago, said Arundelian. Only my flame remains, and it cannot dwell long among the living. Keep your heart steadfast, Finrod Felagund. When your song is ended, the fire will find you. With that, he faded like smoke upon the wind. The warmth that had filled the air fled, and the ridge lay empty. Finrod stood long in silence, gazing northward. Then he turned to his men. Let none speak of what we have seen. The world has enough fear without this, but remember that hope may take any form, even fire. They returned to Nargothrond, but Finrod's heart was never wholly at peace again. Often he would sit beside the river, gazing into its depths as if seeking a reflection long lost. And those who served him in later days said that, in his final years, when the doom of the Silmarils drew near, a faint warmth would sometimes fill the hall, a breath of unseen fire, and the king would smile as though greeting an old friend. Thus the tale of Arundelian the Hidden Flame passed into legend, the man who bore the fire of Morgoth, yet turned it to the light, whose spirit walked the lands of Beleriand when the shadows grew long. And it was said that in the ages that followed, when storms rolled over the ruins of Nargothrond and lightning struck the cliffs above the Narog, the stone would glow faintly for a moment, as if remembering him, the last ember of a fire that refused to die. The years rolled onward, and the War of the Jewels consumed the lands of Beleriand. Finrod Felagund, wisest of the sons of Finarfin, went forth at last to fulfill his doom beside the mortal Baron, and he perished in the dungeons of Tolin Gaurhoth. The halls of Nargothrond fell thereafter into other hands, nobler in strength perhaps, but not in wisdom. And though the great kings of the Noldor rose and fell, the shadow of the north deepened, until even hope seemed a tale half remembered in the dark. Yet beneath all the ruin, the earth still carried memory. Far below the Narog, under stone that no hand of elf or dwarf had shaped, a faint warmth slept. When the echoes of Finrod's harps had faded into legend, that warmth stirred once more. The land was changed. Forests grew where fire had once raged, and new rivers ran through valleys carved by war. The ruins of Nargothrond lay silent, hidden by ivy and the passage of centuries. The bones of kings turned to dust, and the light of the Eldar waned. The War of Wrath came, breaking the world, and the seas swallowed the northern lands. But deep in the roots of the earth, beneath the buried riverbeds, something ancient endured, a slow pulse, steady and waiting. When the world was remade and the First Age ended, the fire awoke again. No eyes beheld its rising. It came first as a whisper through the stone, a tremor that stirred sleeping caverns. In the darkness, a spark flared, a light no larger than a candle's flame. Yet it burned with a heart of red gold, clear and fierce. From it came a breath, faint as the sigh of the sea, the fire remembered. It remembered the hand that had once borne it, the sword that had struck against the darkness, the king who had named it light and not curse. It remembered the sea's cool embrace and the voice that had cast it down. And though ages had passed, it remembered the promise, when shadow and light shall meet again in fire. So the flame began to wander once more, flowing through the cracks of the world like molten thought. It slipped through veins of stone and pools of hidden water. It passed unseen beneath forest roots and mountain halls, moving always toward the places where sorrow lay heaviest. Wherever it came, it left behind not ruin but warmth, faint, like the memory of a hearth long gone cold. And in the second age of the world, when men began to build their kingdoms in the west, a company of wanderers came upon a strange place deep in the forests of Osiriand. There, among the ancient oaks, they found the ruins of a tower unlike any they had seen. Its walls were black and smooth, its stones fused as though by fire. Within lay silence, and the air was warm. Upon the highest floor they found a mark burned into the stone, a single rune in the elven script of Rold, Arendilian. Beneath it, a small ember glowed, unconsumed though no fuel fed it. The leader of the company was a lore master named Callion. He knelt beside the ember, his face lit by its glow. "It is fire," he murmured, "but not of this world. See how it breathes?" His companions drew back in fear. "Leave it be," one said. "The old tales warn of such things, relics of Morgoth's craft." But Callion shook his head. "Not all fire is evil. Some burns to destroy, but some to cleanse. This feels older than either." That night they camped beside the ruins, and though no wood was lit, the warmth of the place guarded them from the chill. In his dreams, Callion saw a figure standing upon the edge of the sea, a tall elf wrapped in grey, his eyes bright as coals. "Why have you come?" the figure asked. "To learn," Callion answered. "Then remember this," said the shade. "Fire is the memory of creation. It devours, yet it also gives life. Those who wield it must choose which flame they serve." When Callion woke, the ember was gone, but where it had lain, the stone was marked with a pattern like a rising sun. He carried that memory all his days, and in later years, when the smiths of Eregion forged their mighty rings, he alone among them spoke softly against their pride. "Beware the forging of hearts," he said, "for the fire that shapes may also bind." Few heeded him. The years turned, and the power of the Noldor rose once more. In time, new fires were kindled. Some fair, some fell, and the old warmth beneath the earth stirred in answer, for it could not sleep while its kin blazed in the world above. Then came the forging of the One Ring, and the great shadow returned. The mountains shook, and the rivers ran red with ash. Far to the west, where the sea still touched the buried bones of Nargothrond, the deep fire awoke in full. It blazed unseen for a single night beneath the waves, burning with the memory of every flame that had ever lived. And in that secret hour, the spirit of Arendilian walked once more along the shores of the world. None saw him save the gulls that cried above the foam, but the wind bore his words across the waters. The fire has found its master again, but even in his darkest craft, a spark of light endures. For every flame that serves the shadow, another shall rise to oppose it. Thus it was, and thus it will ever be. When dawn broke, the sea was calm again, and no sign remained of the hidden blaze save a faint warmth in the sand, where the waves touched the shore. Yet sailors who passed that coast in later ages spoke of strange lights beneath the water, golden glimmers moving far below, like stars caught in the deep. Some said it was the remnant of the old fires of Angband, seeking to rise again. Others said it was a blessing, the spirit of a guardian watching over the world that had forgotten his name. But among the elves who still remembered the ancient songs, it was told that Arundilian, the hidden flame, had not perished nor been wholly consumed. His light had passed beyond the circles of the world, yet pieces of it remained in every hearth, every sunrise, every small act of courage that defied despair. And in this, they saw the final truth of his tale, that no fire, whether born of heaven or hell, could be unmade. It could only be turned toward life or toward ruin by the hands that bore it. So the story of Arundilian ended as it had begun, with the meeting of shadow and flame, and the hope that somewhere, beyond the reach of all darkness, the light still burned, unseen but unforgotten, in the halls unseen.